There's a moment most people never forget. The moment they realize they were played. Maybe it was someone they loved, a boss, a friend, a manipulator disguised as a savior. Or maybe, and this is the harder one, it was their own mind. Because manipulation rarely begins with lies. It begins with hunger. The hunger to be liked, chosen, validated, needed. And once someone discovers what you desperately need, they no longer have to control you. You will control yourself for them. That's what nobody tells you. Most manipulation doesn't happen through force. It happens through a raised eyebrow, a delayed text, a little warmth, then sudden coldness, a little approval, then silence. And your peace is gone. You overthink, you chase, you explain yourself, you rehearse conversations in the shower. The Stoics called this psychological captivity, and they had a precise answer for it. Not louder, not colder, not emotionless. Just one quiet habit that makes a person extraordinarily difficult to move. And it begins with understanding something uncomfortable. The people easiest to manipulate are not always weak. They are often the most empathetic, conscientious, and hopeful people in the room. Because manipulators don't need your weakness. They need your reactivity. That is the door. And tonight, we are talking about how to close it. Let me tell you about a man named Daniel. Not an emperor, not a philosopher, not some legendary Stoic carved in marble. Just a normal man with a normal life. A job, a relationship, a family group chat that somehow turned every holiday into emotional warfare. A boss who always said things like, "I just need someone reliable," which translated meant, "I need someone I can pressure without resistance." Daniel was the kind of person people love to describe as good. Easygoing, helpful, reasonable, patient. And quietly exhausted. At work, every extra task somehow found him. In relationships, every misunderstanding became his responsibility to repair. With family, every boundary he tried to set was treated like betrayal. If he spoke up, someone got hurt. If he stayed silent, someone took more. And every time he told himself the same lie, "It's easier this way." But it wasn't easier. It was just familiar. Because what Daniel didn't understand was that people had learned something about him. He could be moved. Not because he was stupid, not because he was spineless, but because he could not tolerate the discomfort of other people being disappointed with him. That was the lever. And once someone finds your lever, they don't need to fight you. They just need to press. A sigh, a cold tone, a delay in replying, a phrase like, "Wow, I guess I know where I stand now," or "Forget it, it's fine," which of course means it is absolutely not fine, and now the burden has been placed into your lap. And if you are not careful, you spend your whole life dancing to music other people play with their moods. That is manipulation in its most common form. Not always cruel, not always obvious, not always calculated, but real. And the Stoics saw this long before modern psychology gave it names. They understood that the battle is rarely happening outside you first. It begins in your judgment, your interpretation, your impulse, your need to fix, control, rescue, explain, defend. That is where freedom is won or lost. Because nobody can force you to surrender your center without your participation. And most people participate instantly. That's the tragedy. They don't pause long enough to notice that the trap has already been set. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The fastest way to control someone is not through force. It is through emotion. Make them feel guilty, they move. Make them feel afraid, they obey. Make them feel ashamed, they shrink. Make them feel urgent, they stop thinking. Make them feel responsible for your feelings, and they will hand you the keys to their peace. That's why manipulation is so effective. It doesn't attack your logic first. It hijacks your state. A manipulator does not need you to agree with them. They just need you emotionally flooded enough to stop trusting yourself. And once you stop trusting yourself, you start looking to them for instructions on how to feel. That is power. The Stoics built their whole philosophy around preventing that transfer of power. Epictetus taught that between what happens and how you respond, there is a faculty that belongs to you. Your judgment, your ruling center, your ability to decide, what does this mean? What deserves my energy? What is actually mine here? What is merely noise wrapped in urgency? Most people lose themselves because they never strengthen that space. Everything goes straight in. The insult, the accusation, the guilt, the pressure, the disappointment on someone's face, the silence after you say no. Straight in. And then they call that honesty. I'm just a very emotional person. I just react fast. I say what I feel. This is just who I am. No. Sometimes that is not honesty. Sometimes that is a lack of discipline. And people can feel it. They know exactly how to rush you, exactly how to corner you, exactly how to create emotional weather strong enough to make you surrender clarity. And once they know you react fast, they stop respecting your boundaries because they know your boundaries can be negotiated through pressure. But the moment you become someone who does not react on command, the whole dynamic changes. Because now they cannot access you through chaos. Now they have to face something rare. A person who feels everything and still chooses their response carefully. That kind of person is very hard to move. And that is where Stoic power begins. So what is the habit? It is not silence for the sake of silence, not coldness, not passive aggression, not disappearing, not pretending not to care. The habit is this: create a gap before you respond. That's it. A deliberate gap between stimulus and reaction. A breath, a beat, a still face, a slower reply, a delayed answer, a night before sending the message, a refusal to explain yourself while emotionally activated. Simple, but not easy. Because your ego hates the gap. Your ego wants immediate relief. It wants to correct them, defend itself, clear the misunderstanding, prove it meant well, win the moment, regain approval, stop the tension. The pause feels dangerous because it denies the ego its favorite drug, instant emotional discharge. But the Stoics would say, if a moment can control you before you have examined it, you were never free inside it. This is why the pause is powerful. Not because it makes you mysterious, because it restores choice. And choice is what manipulation is trying to steal. When someone pressures you and you answer instantly, they are shaping your response. When someone provokes you and you fire back, they are directing your energy. When someone guilt trips you and you over-explain, they are writing the emotional script and you are acting in it. But when you pause, everything changes. Now you can hear the sentence behind the sentence. Now you can feel what your body is doing. Now you can notice, I am being pulled, I am being rushed, I am being invited into a role I no longer want to play. That is the quiet habit, not the perfect response, the protected response. Imagine Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, surrounded by war, betrayal, disease, political theater, people needing things from him every hour. Do you think he survived that world by reacting to every mood around him? Of course not. He wrote to himself constantly because he knew how quickly the mind gets dragged. Not by swords, by impressions. One rude comment, one fear, one desire, one ego wound, one fantasy of revenge, one need to be seen as right. That was the battlefield. The Stoics understood something modern people forget. If you do not govern the first movement inside you, someone else will. And manipulators are experts at triggering first movements. They know how to make you feel defensive, how to make you explain yourself, how to make you rush, how to make you abandon your principles for the sake of immediate emotional relief. Marcus trained the opposite habit. See clearly, pause, interpret carefully, then act according to character, not emotion. That is why the Stoics seem calm. Not because they felt less, because they refused to let feelings vote before reason arrived. That distinction matters. A Stoic is not a stone. A Stoic is a person whose inner court does not hand out decisions to the loudest emotion in the room. That is strength, and it is learnable. Let's make this painfully practical. You send a clear message, respectful, honest, simple. The reply comes back colder than expected. Wow, didn't think you'd be that kind of person. Or do whatever you want. Or forget it, I won't ask again. And immediately your chest tightens. You start drafting paragraphs in your head. What you meant was, you weren't trying to, they misunderstood. Maybe you should soften it. Maybe you were too harsh. Maybe you should call. Maybe you should just do the thing to stop this from becoming a bigger issue. This is the moment. Not later's now. This is where your life changes or repeats. Because this is where manipulation enters, through your need to remove discomfort quickly. The quiet habit says, do nothing yet. Read it, feel the pull, notice the urge to repair their emotions, and wait. 5 breaths, 10 minutes, an hour, a night if needed. Not to punish them, to return to yourself. Because if your response is built inside their storm, it is not your response. And when you return, you often see the message differently. You see that the sentence was designed to provoke guilt, or force speed, or shift focus from the issue to your character, or punish your boundary by creating tension. And now, from steadiness, you can answer with something simple. Understood, I meant what I said. That doesn't work for me. We can talk when this is calmer. No. No paragraph, no courtroom defense, no emotional donation. That is the part people miss. The pause is not powerful by itself. The pause is powerful because it leads to brevity. And brevity is hard to manipulate. The more words you use under pressure, the more doors you open. Manipulators love extra words. Extra words contain insecurity, neediness, negotiation, cracks. They give people material to twist. But calm brevity is expensive. It comes from self-possession. And people can feel it instantly. There is a kind of person who becomes deeply uncomfortable when you stop reacting the way they expected. Not because you became cruel, because they lost access. Your panic used to reassure them. Your explanations used to feed them. Your guilt used to move you back into place. Your emotional availability used to make you manageable. Then one day, you pause. And they feel it. Maybe you don't answer immediately. Maybe you don't defend yourself. Maybe you don't chase after their withdrawal. Maybe you let their disappointment belong to them. Maybe you stay respectful but unhooked. And suddenly, they do not know what to do with you. This is why silence unsettles controlling people. Not performative silence, not childish silence. Grounded silence. The kind that says, I heard you, I am not threatened, I do not need to react to prove I exist. That kind of silence reveals something brutal. A lot of what passes for power in relationships, friendships, workplaces, and families only works on people who are emotionally available for capture. Once you are no longer available for capture, the game becomes visible. And visible games lose magic. This is why your growth often annoys people who benefited from your confusion. They were never attached only to your love. Sometimes they were attached to your predictability, to the fact that they knew exactly which guilt button to press, exactly which fear to trigger, exactly which role you would rush back into. The pause breaks predictability, and that is why it feels so dangerous at first. Because your old identity was built on being emotionally reachable by force. The new one is built on being emotionally reachable by truth. That is very different. Seneca wrote about insult with a clarity that still feels modern. He understood that insults do not wound us automatically. They wound us through agreement. That doesn't mean words don't hurt. They do. It means the first injury is often external, but the deeper injury happens when we rush to carry the insult into our identity. Someone says you are selfish, cold, weak, ungrateful, difficult, too sensitive, hard to love. And if you have not cultivated the pause, those words enter like kings. They issue commands immediately. Defend yourself, prove them wrong, convince them, earn your innocence, abandon your boundary if that's what it takes. But the Stoic asks a different question. Is it true? If yes, correct yourself without drama. If no, why kneel to it? That question alone saves years of suffering. Because manipulators often succeed not by proving something true, but by making you so emotionally activated that you skip the examination entirely. You hear the accusation and treat it as a verdict. But the pause interrupts that process. It lets you inspect the arrow before pulling it into your chest. Not every opinion deserves entrance. Not every accusation deserves defense. Not every emotional display deserves response. That discernment is one of the highest forms of self-respect. Here is where this gets deeper. For many people, the inability to pause did not begin in adulthood. It began in childhood. Maybe love felt unstable. Maybe approval had to be earned. Maybe peace in the house depended on reading the room. Maybe someone's anger trained you to become hypervigilant. Maybe your role was to smooth things over, be mature early, keep everyone okay, avoid making things worse. And so you became excellent at emotional management. Not your own, everyone else's. You learned to anticipate tension before it arrived, to apologize fast, to soften your truth, to over-explain your intentions, to scan faces, to shrink when energy changed. And as a child, that might have been adaptive. It may even have protected you. But as an adult, that same pattern can become a door through which manipulative people walk without even knocking. Because they recognize something in you. This person can be made responsible for my emotions. This person can be hurried by tension. This person mistakes self-betrayal for love. And none of that is your fault. But it does become your responsibility once you see it. This is why the quiet habit is not just a communication tool. It is reparenting. It is you teaching your nervous system. We do not have to answer danger immediately anymore. We do not have to abandon ourselves just because someone else is uncomfortable. We do not have to make ourselves smaller to make a situation calmer. We can pause, we can assess, we can choose. That is healing in real time. Not glamorous, not loud, but life-changing. If you want this habit to become real, you need to understand its 3 layers. The first layer is physical. When triggered, your body moves before your philosophy does. Heart rate, jaw tension, heat in the chest, shallow breath, racing thoughts, a need to reply now. So the first pause is bodily. Unclench your jaw, relax your shoulders. Exhale slower than you inhale. Put the phone down. Do not type with adrenaline in your hands. The second layer is mental. Ask what is actually happening here. Not what am I afraid this means. What is happening? A request, a disappointment, a pressure tactic, a projection, an attempt to confuse the issue, an emotional performance designed to rush me. The third layer is moral. Who do I want to be in this moment? Not how do I get out of discomfort fastest. Who do I want to be? Clear, kind, firm, unmoved, honest, measured. That third layer matters most. Because Stoicism is not just about feeling calmer. It is about responding in a way that preserves character. Anyone can be cold. Anyone can be defensive. Anyone can disappear. But to stay composed, truthful, and dignified under pressure, that is art. And it begins with the pause. Manipulators hate clarity. They love fog. They love emotional overgrowth, where nothing is defined but everything is intense. They love vague guilt, implied obligation, half-spoken accusations, withheld affection, punishing silence, sudden urgency, shifting standards. Why? Because confused people are easier to control. A confused person explains. A clear person decides. A confused person argues with tone. A clear person responds to facts. A confused person tries to win back harmony. A clear person notices when harmony is being used as bait. And the pause creates clarity. That is why it is such a threat. A paused mind notices patterns. It notices this person only gets upset when they don't get their way. This conversation always changes the subject when accountability appears. This guilt arrives every time I set a boundary. This urgency is manufactured. This disrespect is disguised as honesty. This misunderstanding keeps happening in the same direction. And once a pattern becomes visible, you stop personalizing it. That is huge, because manipulators survive on personalization. They want you asking, "What did I do wrong?" instead of, "What pattern am I in?" The first question traps you in self-doubt. The second restores perspective. Stoicism lives in perspective. Let's go even more concrete. At work, someone says, "We're all staying late. I hope that's not a problem." Old pattern, panic, instant compliance, resentment later. The pause, you breathe. You hear the pressure hidden inside the politeness. You answer, "I'm not available tonight." No long apology, no novel, no fake emergency invented to justify your limit. At home, a family member says, "Wow, you've changed." But what they mean is, you no longer allow what you used to tolerate. Old pattern, defend, explain growth, ask to be understood. The pause, you let the sentence sit. You do not rush to restore their comfort. You answer, "Yes, I have." In a relationship, someone goes cold because you said no. Old pattern, chase, fix, overfunction, offer more than you meant to. The pause, you notice the withdrawal. You refuse to confuse distance with authority. You let them have their feeling without surrendering your truth. This is how manipulation ends in real life. Not through domination, through non-cooperation with emotional coercion. And once you start living like this, you will lose something. Access to people who only like the version of you they could steer. Let that happen, because what you gain is worth more. Inner authority. There is a sentence many people need to hear. You do not need a courtroom defense for every decision that protects your peace. Read that again inwardly. You do not need a courtroom defense for every decision that protects your peace. Over-explaining is often a trauma response disguised as communication. It comes from the belief that if you can just say it perfectly with enough softness, logic, care, detail, and reassurance, then you will be safe. Then they won't be upset. Then they will see your heart. Then the tension will leave. Then you can breathe. But some people do not want clarity. They want access. And no explanation in the world can satisfy someone who is upset because your boundary worked. That is a hard lesson. A freeing one, but hard. The Stoics remind us, your job is not to control their interpretation. Your job is to act with integrity. That means you may be misunderstood. You may be disliked. You may be called selfish by people who were comfortable when you were self-abandoning. Let them speak. A person who must be endlessly explained is often a person who has already decided your clarity is inconvenient. The pause helps you remember that. It stops you from throwing your piece into a conversation that was never designed to hold it. When pressure comes, most people fail because they think they need the perfect response. You don't. You need regulated simplicity. Here are the kinds of responses that become available when the pause is real. I'm not discussing this while emotions are high. That doesn't work for me. I've made my decision. I understand you're upset. I'm not able to do that. We can revisit this later. No, that last word terrifies people. Not because it is cruel, Because it is complete. And completeness is difficult to manipulate. A weak boundary invites negotiation. A clean boundary reveals reality. Now listen carefully. The power is not in the phrase alone. A manipulator can smell performative phrases from a mile away. The power is in the nervous system behind the phrase. If your voice says no, but your energy says, please don't hate me, the conversation is still open. But if your energy says, I am calm enough to disappoint you without abandoning myself, something changes. That is what the pause builds. Not language. Capacity. There is a reason Stoic philosophy has helped people survive not only rude conversations, but prisons, wars, loss, grief, betrayal, and extreme suffering. Because it trains the one thing no outside force should control, your inner command. James Stockdale carried Stoic philosophy through years of captivity in Vietnam. He understood that external conditions can be brutal, unfair, crushing, and yet a human being can still protect the final territory inside. That does not mean life becomes easy. It means your deepest power stops depending on circumstances. And on a smaller, everyday scale, that is exactly what manipulation tests. Can your inner command be purchased with pressure? Can it be rented by guilt? Can it be hijacked by someone else's disappointment? Can your peace be moved every time someone changes tone? If yes, you are not at rest in yourself yet. But if you can pause, observe, and choose, then even in hard moments, something inside remains seated. That seated part of you, that is the Stoic center. Find it enough times, and eventually people stop trying the old methods on you. Not because the world became kinder, because you stopped being available to coercion. Let's go back to Daniel. Nothing dramatic happened. No heroic speech, no dramatic breakup scene, no grand final confrontation. Just one afternoon. His boss dropped another last-minute request on him with the usual tone, the same soft pressure, the same assumption that he would fold. And Daniel felt it. The familiar spike, the old reflex rising. Explain why he couldn't, apologize 3 times, offer a compromise he didn't want, absorb the disappointment, carry it home. But this time he paused. Just for a second, long enough to feel the machinery start, long enough to recognize this is the old script. And then he said calmly, I'm not available for that. His boss stared. Not angry exactly, just surprised. Because surprise is what controlling people feel when the machine stops working. Later that week, a family member sent a message designed to provoke guilt. He paused again. Didn't rush, didn't explain, didn't surrender the night to emotional cleanup. The reply was short, respectful, firm. And something strange happened. He felt grief. Not victory. Grief. Because part of him realized how many years he had spent being the easiest person in the room to move. How much life had been shaped by moods that were not his. How often he had confused self-erasure with goodness. That grief is normal. When you stop being manipulable, you don't just gain freedom. You also meet the cost of not having used it sooner. Be gentle there. Regret is not for punishment. It is for awakening. Daniel didn't become fearless. He became slower, clearer, less available to emotional force. And over time, people adjusted. Some got healthier around him. Some got colder. Some disappeared. All of it was information. And for the first time in years, his peace was no longer up for auction. Because once you stop reacting immediately, you start seeing everything differently. You notice who respects boundaries without needing theater. You notice who only feels close to you when you are easy to override. You notice how often urgency was fake, how often guilt was strategic, how often your anxiety was someone else's tool. But you also notice something beautiful. The pause doesn't just protect you from manipulation. It improves your whole life. You make better decisions, you speak fewer regrets, you stop creating extra suffering with impulsive reactions, you become harder to bait, less chaotic, more discerning, more trustworthy to yourself. And that last one matters most. Because the deepest damage manipulation causes is not just that other people control you. It's that you stop trusting your own signals. You feel discomfort and call it selfishness. You feel pressure and call it obligation. You feel misalignment and call it overthinking. You feel violation and call it being too sensitive. The pause helps you hear yourself again. And once you can hear yourself, you become much harder to govern from the outside. So how do you build this habit in real life? Not in theory, in real life. Start here. When anything emotionally charged happens, do not answer at the speed of your trigger. That rule alone will save you. Second, name what you feel before you speak. Pressure, guilt, fear, anger, shame, urgency. What you can name, you are less likely to obey blindly. Third, ask one Stoic question: what here is actually mine? My tone, yes. My choice, yes. Their disappointment, no. Their interpretation, no. Their mood, no. Their attempt to rush me, not mine. Fourth, shorten your response. Half the words, then half again. Fifth, watch what happens when you stop overfunctioning. Who gets angry, who gets confused, who gets respectful, who gets honest. That is data, do not ignore it. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming clean. Clean in thought, clean in speech, clean in boundary, clean in self-respect. And cleanliness is quiet. That's why the habit is quiet. No one may even notice it at first. But they will feel it. Oh, they will feel it. There is a version of you that still believes every tension must be solved immediately. That every cold tone is an emergency. That every accusation deserves defense. That every disappointed face is a moral obligation. That every misunderstanding must be cleaned up by you. That peace means keeping others comfortable. And there is another version of you. A quieter one. A stronger one. A version that listens fully, feels deeply, and still does not move until truth arrives. A version that does not let guilt rent space in the mind without inspection. A version that can say, I heard you, without meaning, I will betray myself now. A version that knows silence is not weakness when it is chosen from steadiness. That version of you is very difficult to manipulate. Because manipulation needs speed, it needs fog, it needs insecurity, it needs your instant cooperation. The pause removes all four. So the next time someone presses, pulls, accuses, withholds, rushes, or wraps control in emotion, remember this. You do not owe an immediate reaction to every force that touches you. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to let the wave hit the rock without becoming the wave. That is not detachment from life. That is mastery within it. The Stoics did not become powerful because life was gentle with them. They became powerful because they learned that the space between event and response is sacred. Guard that space and you guard your life. Lose that space and anyone can enter. So build the quiet habit. Pause before you respond. Shorten what you say. Refuse to explain your dignity. Let other people have feelings without appointing yourself their servant. And when the old urgency rises, do not obey it. Sit still long enough to remember who is in command. That is where freedom begins. And once it begins, the world notices. Not because you became louder. Because at last, you became unmovable.